December 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow fell like ash from a funeral pyre, blanketing the shattered remnants of what had once been roads, now just frozen veins snaking through pine thickets and blasted earth. The air hung heavy with the scent of wet wool and unwashed men, the kind of cold that seeped into bones and turned breath into fragile ghosts. For the men of the 106th Infantry Division, fresh from stateside training and thrust into the meat grinder of the Bulge, this was no winter wonderland. It was a graveyard waiting for fresh tenants. Private James Red Mallory, huddled in the lee of a half-buried foxhole, his M1 Garand cradled across his knees like a reluctant lover. At 20, he was all lean angles and freckled skin, the kind of boy who'd chased lightning bugs across Kentucky tobacco fields before the draft yanked him into this frozen hell. His hair, a mop of copper that earned him the nickname, stuck out from under his helmet like a defiant flame against the whiteout. He chewed on a splinter of pine branch, eyes scanning the tree line where shadows played tricks on the wind-whipped flakes. "Red, you son of a bitch, get your ass back in line." The voice cracked through the squad's ragged formation like a whip on ice. Lieutenant Elias Grayson, all spit-shine boots and Oxford polish even in this mud, strode up with the purposeful gait of a man who believed war could be won with checklists. Grayson was 32, a lawyer from Boston who'd traded courtrooms for foxholes, and he carried the weight of the manuals like Holy Writ. His breath fogged the air as he jabbed a gloved finger at Red. "Formation means formation, Private, not wandering off like you're hunting squirrels." Red didn't flinch. He spat out the pine splinter, his southern drawl rolling slow and thick as sorghum. "Just checking the wire, sir. That stretch by the stump, it's sagging like Mama's old hammock. One good tug from a kraut patrol, and it'll snap like a dry bone." Grayson's jaw tightened, the scar on his cheek, souvenir from North Africa, pulling taut. "The wire's fine. Engineer said so, and you don't check without orders. You're a liability, Mallory. One more stunt like last week's joyride into no man's land, and I'll have you digging latrines till the thaw." The squad, 15 souls crammed into a cluster of slit trenches around Wolf Point, a nothing crossroads marked on maps as a strategic choke point, shifted uneasily. Wolf Point wasn't much, a splintered signpost half buried in snow, flanked by skeletal oaks and a frozen creek that gurgled like a dying man. But it guarded the artery to Bastogne, and in the swirling rumors of a big push, every inch mattered. Corporal Tomas Diaz, Red's loader and the closest thing he had to a friend in this outfit, nudged him with a boot. Diaz was 24, a stocky kid from East LA with ink-black hair and eyes that held the quiet weight of too many brothers lost to Pacific Islands. He loaded shells for the platoon's lone 30 cal with hands steady as a surgeon's, but off-duty, he prayed rosaries under his breath. "Ease up, S. LT's got the book. We got the bullets." Red grinned, that lopsided flash of teeth that made him look more farm boy than foxhole rat. "Books don't bleed, Tommy. Bullets do." But inside, the words twisted like barbed wire in his gut. Liability. The word stuck, same as it had back in basic when he'd borrowed a jeep to scout a ravine the brass overlooked. "Found a minefield before it found them. Lucky," the men whispered. "Reckless," the officers spat. Truth was, Red didn't set out to break rules. They just never fit right, like hand-me-down boots on a growing boy. Growing up in the hollers of Harlan County, rules were for the mine bosses and the revenuers, folks who measured men by quotas, not heart. His daddy taught him to track deer by the bend in the grass, not the clock on the wall. And his brother, Elias, Big Eli, 25 and built like a barn door, had embodied the straight path. Eli enlisted first in 41, waving off Red's pleas to wait. "Duty's duty, little brother. You follow the line or the line follows you." Eli died at Kasserine Pass, pinned in a ditch by Stukas, because some colonel swore the flank was secure. Obeyed orders right into a coffin. Red enlisted 6 months later, 18 and burning. "Won't let him bury me proper." The ghost of Eli followed him across the Atlantic, a shadow in every briefing, every barked command. At night, in the sodden pup tents, Red would wake to the dream. Eli's face in the flare light, mouth open in a scream no one heard. "Why'd you wait, Red? Why'd you wait for the call?" The platoon settled into the uneasy rhythm of watch. Grayson paced the perimeter, barking adjustments to the wire and sandbags, his voice a metronome against the wind's howl. Diaz cleaned the 30 cal with oiled rags, muttering in Spanish about saints and second chances. The others, kids from Brooklyn tenements and Iowa farms, huddled over K-rations, trading cigarettes for jokes that fell flat in the cold. Red slipped away again, not far, just to the creek's edge where the snow thinned to reveal boot prints too fresh, too deliberate. Kraut scouts maybe, probing like wolves before the pack. He crouched, fingers tracing the indentations, the faint scrape of a rifle stock. They're close, closer than the LT thinks. His pulse thrummed, not fear exactly, but that electric hum he'd felt chasing storms across the ridges back home. The kind that said move before the sky cracked open. Mallory. Grayson's shout yanked him back. The lieutenant loomed at the foxhole lip, face flushed under the helmet brim. "What the hell are you doing? I gave an order." Red straightened, snow cascading from his shoulders. "Prints, sir. Fresh ones, heading east toward the rise. If they're flankerin', we need eyes there." Grayson's eyes narrowed, the manual warring with the map in his head. Wolf Point was doctrine incarnate. Hold the line, call for Artie if it heats up. No freelancing. Scouts are on it. You get back, or I'll write you up for insubordination. The word hung like smoke. Insubordination. Eli's ghost whispered it in the wind. Follow the line. Red's jaw clenched, the cold biting deeper. "Yes, sure." But as he trudged back, boots crunching the crust, his mind raced ahead. The rise overlooked the crossroads, a blind spot on the sketches, but clear as day from the creek. One man with a Garand could buy warning shots, or one man could die waitin'. Diaz caught his eye as he dropped into the hole, passing a crumpled Lucky Strike. "You're gonna get us both killed, you know that?" The corporal's voice was low, laced with that mix of exasperation and envy all the squad felt. Diaz followed rules like breathing, steady, necessary. But he'd seen Red's luck firsthand, that Jeep run last week, dodging mortars like they were raindrops. "LT's right. You're a goddamn magnet for trouble." Red lit the smoke, inhaling deep, the tobacco's bite cutting the frost. "Trouble finds us all, Tommy. I just meet it halfway." He exhaled a plume that twisted into Eli's face for a heartbeat, then vanished. "Halfway ain't far enough, brother. Not here." Dawn crept in reluctant, a gray smear bleeding through the clouds. The platoon stirred, Grayson calling muster with clip deficiency. "Eyes sharp, men. Intel says the line's quiet. Jerry's licking wounds from the Rhine." But the wind carried doubt, a low moan through the pines that sounded like distant engines. Red felt it in his teeth, that pre-storm prickle. He glanced at the rise again, the boot prints already softening under new snow. Grayson noticed. "Forget it, Private. We hold here. That's the play." Red nodded, but his fingers tightened on the Garand. Holding got Eli killed. The squad formed up, rifles at port, the metallic click of bolts echoing like prayers unanswered. Diaz bumped his shoulder, a silent stay frosty. The cold wrapped tighter, snowflakes melting on Red's lashes, tasting of salt and iron. Then, the first crack split the air. Not thunder, but something sharper, hungrier. A flare popped overhead, ugly red against the white, and the tree line erupted. Bursts of MP40 chatter stitched the snow, bullets whining off sandbags like angry hornets. "Contact! East flank!" Grayson bellowed, diving for the 30 cal as Diaz swung it to bear. Red didn't wait for orders. He was already moving, belly low through the drift toward the creek. Not waiting this time. Shouts and screams tangled with the roar, "Medic!" And the world narrowed to the snap of lead and the crunch underfoot. Grayson's voice cut through. "Fall back to the CP, Mallory. Get your ass." A grenade arced lazy through the gray, blooming black fire in the command post. The blast waves slapped Red sideways, snow and splintered wood raining down. He hit the ground hard, ears ringing, tasting blood. When he pushed up, the outpost was a cauldron, the CP a smoking crater, Grayson's helmet upside down in the slush like a discarded thought. Radio silence. Command gone. 12 shadows lumbered through the haze, Panzers, long-barreled kings growling over the rise, treads pulverizing the crust. The spearhead. Wolf Point's dawn had teeth. Red's breath came ragged, Eli's ghost solid now, arm around his shoulder. "Run, little brother. Or fight." He chambered around, the brass cold as sin. "Ain't runnin'." The platoon fragmented, men scrambling for cover, Diaz dragging a wounded radio man, the LT's body twisted in the wire like a broken doll. Grayson had died reaching for the field phone, by the book to the last. Orders? What orders? Red's eyes locked on the lead Panzer, its turret swiveling slow, deliberate. Doctrine in steel. He could retreat, melt into the woods like the manual said, but the crossroads behind them fed the whole line. Lose it, and the Bulge swallowed Bastogne whole. "If I can't stop 'em," he muttered to the wind, voice steady as Kentucky clay, "I'll make 'em remember me." He didn't mean to disobey orders, he just never learned how to wait for permission to survive. The world ended in a stutter of fire and frost. Wolf Point wasn't a crossroads anymore, it was a slaughter pen. The snow churned to pink slush under the first wave of German infantry spilling from the pines like ink in water. The Panzers loomed at the tree line's edge, their diesel growl a bass thrum that vibrated through Red's teeth. Idling engines exhaling plumes of black that clawed at the gray dawn. 12 of them, Mark IVs and Vs mixed in the spearhead, turrets slewing like the heads of hunting dogs scenting blood. The lead King Tiger's 88mm cannon yawned black, a promise of erasure. Red hit the frozen creek bed on his belly, the Garand slung tight across his back, water shockingly cold even through the layers as it soaked his wool. Bullets snapped overhead, stitching the air with that peculiar zip-whine of lead, parting frozen molecules. He risked a glance back. The outpost was unraveling. The 30 cal chattered defiance from Diaz's pit, brass arcing hot into the snow, but the corporal was alone now, his gunner down, throat open by shrapnel, gurgling pink foam into the drift. Grayson lay where the grenade had tossed him, one arm outstretched toward the shattered radio console, fingers curled like he was still grasping for the ether. "Regiment, this is Wolf Point Actual. Ambush, heavy armor, request immediate." The last words died in static. The set's innards spilled like a gutted fish. Silence fell for a heartbeat, that deceptive lull where the wind reclaims the screams. Red's ears rang, a high whine overlaying the distant crump of mortars walking the flank. "They're comin' for the road." The Ardennes push was no feint. This was the hammer, Hitler's gamble to split the line at the seams. Bastogne hung by threads like Wolf Point, and if these iron beasts rolled unchecked, the threads snapped. He crawled upstream, using the creek's meander for cover. The current a numb murmur against his gloves. The platoon, what was left, scattered like roaches under lamplight. 5 men hauling ass toward the fallback rally, shadows against the white. 3 more pinned in the wire, popping shots wild and desperate. Diaz still pouring lead, his face a mask of sweat and scripture. "Red? Get the fuck out of there!" The corporal's yell barely carried over the din, but Red caught it, twisting to signal hold with a fist pump. No time for hollering. Red vaulted the bank, low crouching through a thicket of blasted elderberry, thorns snagging his coat like accusatory fingers. Eli's ghost was thick now, a pressure at his temples. "Fall back, little brother. Live to fight smart." But smart was Grayson's ghost too, twisted in the mud. Doctrine said consolidate, signal for armor support, trade space for time. Bullshit. Time was the Panzer's ally. Their treads would grind the crossroads to gravel before any Shermans crested the ridge 10 miles back. Red reached the wrecked CP tent, its canvas a shredded rag, flapping like a distress flag. Inside the shell crater, the lieutenant's body steamed faintly, heat bleeding into the cold. Red knelt, ignoring the slick warmth under his knees, and rifled the pouches. A half-dozen grenades, pinned deep in frost, a signal flare, bulbous and brittle, the LT's map case, smeared with blood but intact. No radio, no runner, just him, one man against 12 beasts. His breath hitched, not panic, but that farm boy calculus kicking in. Count the fences before the storm hits. The first Panzer lurched forward, treads pulverizing a splintered oak, its hull shedding snow in wet clumps that hissed on the hot exhaust stacks. Infantry dismounted in its shadow, gray ghosts with SCG-44s probing the drifts. A burst caught one of the pinned men, Private Kowalski, the kid from Philly who'd smuggled Hershey bars in his pack, lifting him like a marionette before dumping him limp. The others broke then, bolting for the woods, their flight a ragged cheer from the Germans. Diaz's 30 jammed, overheat or blood in the works, and he ducked as rounds chewed the sandbags. "Mierda, Red, they're flanking." The corporal was up to his elbows in the action, swapping barrels with bare hands, skin blistering on the metal. Loyal to a fault, that one, followed Red's dumbass leads because someone had to watch the loco gringo's back. Red didn't answer with words. He answered with motion, the only currency left. He palmed 2 grenades, the pineapples heavy as sin in the chill, and lobbed them arc-perfect toward the lead tank's blind spot. They skittered across the snow, fuses hissing like pissed-off cats, and erupted in twin blooms of black smoke and shrapnel. Not a kill. Panzers laughed at frags, but the skirts shredded and the beasts slewed, turret whipping blind. The dismounts scattered, one dropping with a leg turned to hamburger, his scream a raw hook in the wind. Chaos. That's the play. Red's mind raced, piecing the scraps. The wrecked jeeps from last week's convoy nosed into a ditch 50 yards west, their fuel tanks ruptured but not fully drained. The abandoned demo charges from the engineers, wired crude for tree felling but begging for mischief. The creek itself, half frozen, a natural choke if you could funnel 'em. He sprinted low, zigzagging through the bullet-swept zone, the Garand barking twice, crack crack, to drop a flanker mid-stride. The man folded neat, face-planting into the slush, steam rising from the entry wound like a sigh. Diaz saw it, the impossible calm in Red's sprint. "What the hell you doing? Fall back." But there was no back, not with the Panzers bridging the gap, their MG-42s hosing the open ground like fire hoses of lead. The corporal cursed in 2 languages, then yanked the jammed barrel free and humped it over the lip, joining Red's ghost dance. "You're insane, cabron. What's the plan?" Red slid into the ditch beside the jeeps, breath-heaving plumes that merged with the smoke. Up close, the vehicles were charnel. One a gutted shell from a prior airstrike, hood popped and engine bay a nest of exposed wires. The other upright but listing, windshield starred with cracks, a radio man's corpse slumped over the dash, eyes frozen open in surprise. Red dragged the body clear, and popped the hood, fingers numb but nimble, splicing battery leads to the fuel pump with a pocket knife. The motor coughed, then caught with a wet roar, headlights flickering like dying fireflies. "Plan's simple, Tommy. We make 'em think we're a platoon. Lights, noise, hellfire. Buy the boys time to rally." He yanked the choke, the engine belching blue smoke that reeked of ethyl and cordite. Diaz crouched beside him, covering the approach with his Thompson. Stolen from the CP, rules be damned, the subgun's drum mag heavy on his hip. "That's not a plan, that's suicide." Diaz's voice cracked, the rosary beads clicking under his collar as he fired a burst, stitching a German half-track's tire. The vehicle fishtailed, slewing into a drift. Red met his eyes, the copper glint steady. "Better'n waitin' to die proper. Eli tried that, ain't my way." The name hung, a talisman and a curse. Diaz knew the story, whole squad did, whispered over sea rations like ghost tales. Brother lost to the book, Red fighting the pages ever since. The Panzers advanced in echelon, the lead trio probing the road while the rest fanned the flanks, spotters in the cupolas glassing the haze with binoculars. From the lead turret, Lieutenant Karl Weber peered through his scopes, the world a green-tinted blur of white and ruin. Weber was 35, a Rhinelander with a dueling scar on his jaw and a Führer-endorsed playbook etched in his skull. Schnellheit und Schwerpunkt, speed and focus. The Americans were green, their lines brittle as autumn leaves. This outpost, a speed bump. His radio crackled. "Weber, report, resistance?" "Leichter Widerstand, Herr Major. Infantry remnants, no armor, we roll through." Weber's gunner traversed, the Koch's MG chattering to suppress the ghost shots from the ditch. But something nagged. The smoke from those grenades hung wrong, too dispersed like a feint. And now, lights flickering in the west, he keyed the mic again. "Flankers, check that glow. Possible fallback position." Back in the ditch, Red gunned the jeep's engine, the roar a deliberate thunder, then killed it abrupt, echoing off the hills like a whole convoy revving. He fired the flare from Grayson's kit, popping it east to silhouette the tanks against the rise, shadows stretching long and menacing. To the Germans, it looked like signals, artillery spotters calling fire. To Weber, it looked like coordination. "Scheisse. They're organized. Call up the infantry. Flush 'em," Weber barked, his panther bucking as the main gun boomed, shell screaming toward the outpost's husk. The blast cratered the CP deeper, hurling frozen dirt skyward in a geyser. Red used the flash to move, belly crawling to the demo charges. 6 claymores lashed to pines, tripwires taut but unfinished. He worked fast, gloved hands splicing the engineer's det cord to a salvaged blinker mine, the kind meant for roads but perfect for mischief. One pull and it'd chain detonate like dominoes in hell. "Tommy, cover me. 2 minutes." Diaz nodded, fear etching lines in his face, but he laid down fire. Bert, the Thompsons chatter buying shadows. A German squad crested the bank, Estiges questing, but Diaz dropped two, the rest ducking into cover. "Go! I got you!" Red yanked the wire taut, the first charge popping with a whump that showered the lead Panzer's flank with pine splinters and gravel. Not penetrating, but the skirts flapped loose and the driver slewed, exposing the side to Diaz's next burst. Coax fire answered, rounds ricocheting off the hull with sparks like welder's kiss. The chaos bloomed, smoke from the jeeps merging with grenade haze, engine echoes bouncing off the creek, flare light painting false silhouettes in the drifts. The Germans hesitated, Weber's voice on the net urgent now. Multiple positions, echoes, could be a company. His gunner loaded AP, but the targets danced, shots from ditch, from thicket, from nowhere. Red slid back to Diaz, both gasping, the air thick with cordite and the metallic tang of blood. It worked. They're buying it. Diaz wiped his face, streaking soot. "For now, what's next, loco? We can't hold this." Red's grin flashed, feral in the gloom. "Next, we make it hurt." He chambered a fresh clip, the clink of vow. The Panzers reformed, treads grinding closer, but the spearhead stuttered, infantry probing cautious now, expecting the ambush within the ambush. Behind them, in the woods, the routed survivors paused their flight, hearing the roar and blasts. "Is that us?" one whispered. "Nah, sounds bigger." Whispers turned to rally, the chaos Red sewed pulling threads back together. But the cold clawed deeper, Eli's ghost murmuring enough, run, and Red shoved it down. Grayson died holding the line. Red would bend it till it broke the enemy first. The sun breached the clouds, a weak piss yellow gilding the wreckage. Silence again, broken only by the Panzer's idle rumble. Then the next wave crested, machine gun nests unfolding from half-tracks ready to sweep the illusions clean. Red breathed deep, the frost burning his lungs. "Come on then, let's dance." The rules died before sunrise. Red just buried them properly. The weak sun clawed higher, turning the Ardennes into a study in contrasts. Blinding white fields scarred by black smoke plumes, the Panzer's hulls gleaming like wet obsidian as they nosed forward. Lieutenant Weber's Panther led the reformed echelon, its long gun probing the haze like a blind man's cane, the crew buttoned up tight against the ghosts. Weber's scopes swept the ditch where the jeep lights had flickered, nothing now but churned slush and the acrid reek of burned rubber. "Illusion," he muttered to his gunner, a Berlin boy with steady hands and a fatalist's shrug. "Yankee tricks. Push through. Infantry, clear that gully." But Weber's gut twisted, that old duelist's instinct from 39 maneuvers. The resistance wasn't broken. It was scattered. Shots from nowhere, echoes multiplying like lies in a briefing room. His radio man relayed the flank reports. "Herr Leutnant, multiple firings, east bank, west thicket. Casualties light, but they're buying time." Time for what? Reinforcements? The map said no. Wolf Point was isolated, a forgotten spur. Yet the air hummed with it, that predatory patience. In the ditch, Red Mallory wiped diesel from his hands on his trousers, the black smear a war paint stripe across his knuckles. The jeep's engine ticked cool now, a spent beast, but its roar had sown doubt, enough to stall the advance for precious minutes. Diaz hunkered beside him, Thompson cradled like a rosary, his breath ragged plumes that fogged his dog tags. "That bought us?" "What? 5 minutes? They're coming again, Red. We gotta move." Red nodded, eyes mapping the ground ahead. The creek's frozen meander offering hip-deep cover if you hugged the bends. A stand of birches 50 yards north, trunks slim as matchsticks but enough to break lines of sight. The demo charges he'd primed, their tripwires now spiderwebbing the snow like veins under skin. Math it out. Not the clean equations of Grayson's briefings. Hold position, suppress, call fire, but the hauler's kind. 1 rock slide to block the trail, 2 snares for the hounds. Eli had drilled him on the straight path. Red learned the crooked by surviving it. "We don't move, we dance," Red drawled, voice low as creek ice cracking. He scooped a handful of the half-frozen grenades from the CP loot, their casings frosted brittle, and jury-rigged a daisy chain, pins looped through salvaged fishing line from a dead engineer's pack, strung low across the gully mouth. "Pull one," and the rest followed like dominoes in a fever dream. You take the birches, fire short bursts, make it sound like a squad leapfrogging. I'll work the creek, bounce shots off the ice for echo. Diaz's eyes widened, the cross under his shirt glinting as he shifted. Echo? Like, pretending we're everywhere? Fear laced his words, but there was steel too, the kind forged in Guadalcanal foxholes, where saints and shadows kept you breathing. He'd loaded for Red before, covered his reckless sprints, because in the squad's quiet tallies, Red's chaos had saved more hides than the LT's orders. You're gonna get us both in the papers, S. Dead heroes. Better in footnotes, Red shot back, clapping Diaz's shoulder hard enough to jolt a grin from the corporal. Eli's in the footnotes. Ain't joining him. He belly-crawled east, the Garand dragging furrows in the snow, every inch a negotiation with the cold that numbed his toes to stumps. The first trap went in smooth. Grenades nestled in a snowbank, lying taut to a birch root that'd snag a boot or tread. Crude, but the Panzers were wide. Funnel the infantry first, bog the beasts. The Germans came methodical, Weber's playbook unspooling. Half-track MG nests laying suppressive fire in measured bursts, brap, 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 the green tracers arcing lazy over the ditch to pin illusions. Infantry advanced in bounds, 10-man teams, STGs questing low, grenades arcing preliminary like questions before the storm. The lead squad hit the gully, boots crunching the crust, and Red waited. Pulse sinking to the crunch-snap rhythm. 3, 2. The point man snagged the line, subtle, just a tug, and the world replied in chain lightning. Grenades popped in cascade, whump, 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 shrapnel scything the air like reaper's teeth. 3 down instant, limbs cartwheeling pink, 2 more staggering, howling as they clawed at bellies turned to pulp. The survivors dove prone, radioing frantic. Meanin'. Sprengfallen. Mines. Traps. Weber's scopes caught the bloom, his face paling under the headset. Halt. Regroup. Engineers forward. Red didn't celebrate. He was already moving, slithering into the creek bed where the ice shelved thin over current. The water bit like acid through his boots, but it muffled sound, turned splashes to whispers. He fired from the hip, crack. The Garan's report muffled, then sharp again as he surfaced 10 yards down, popping over the bank to tag a flanker scrambling for cover. The echo worked its magic. One shot from the creek, sounding south, another from Diaz in the birches, north and ragged like overlapping squads. To the Germans it was encirclement, fire from 3 vectors, impossible for remnants. Diaz played his part, the Thompsons burst a staccato prayer, bursts chewed deliberate to mimic reloads and shifts. He ducked as return fire splintered birch bark, white curls flying like confetti, a round grazing his sleeve and drawing blood hot and immediate. Santa Maria? He bit off the curse, sighting down the sights to drop another, headshot clean, the man crumpling without a sound. From his nest, the Panzers looked biblical. Iron locusts devouring the horizon, their idols a growl that promised apocalypse. But Red's tricks made them pause, spotters glassing frantic, calling false targets. Weber slammed his fist on the traverse wheel, the clank echoing in the turret's coffin. They're toying with us. No company, no armor. It's a single nest, amplified. His gunner snorted, loading he for the birches, but Weber waved it off. No, waste. Flank wide, use the half-tracks to sweep. Cut the head off. Pride stung. He'd read the Yanks as broken, but this was Listiger Hayes, cunning hare. His own men faltered, the trap's carnage steaming in the snow, a reminder that Ardennes ghosts bit back. Red felt the shift, the half-track's engines revving higher, treads biting fresh snow to arc wide. They're learning. He abandoned the creek, hauling for the thicket west, lungs burning, the Garand sling a noose on his shoulder. En route, he palmed the signal flare, Grayson's last, and twisted it into a pine bough, wiring the igniter to a pressure plate scavenged from a dud mortar round. Step wrong and it popped skyward, painting the Germans for their own shadows. False signal. To any flyboy overhead, it'd scream Artie incoming. To Weber, it'd scream backup. He reached the thicket as the first half-track crested the gully, its 20mm flak gun swiveling eager. Red burrowed into elderberry snarls, thorns raking welts on his neck, and fired deliberate. Crack. Pause. Crack. Spacing shots to simulate a bar team laying covering fire. The half-track's gunner traversed blind, shells chewing foliage to mist, but Red was ghosting again, 50 feet over, prone in a drift, rolling a half-frozen grenade downhill like a bowling ball from hell. It bounced true, lodging under the track guard, and erupted with a crump that slewed the vehicle broadside, treads spinning futile in slush. Diaz whooped low from the birches, got him. But the cheer died as MG fire hosed his position, bullets splintering wood inches from his ear. He returned fire, the Thompson's drum clicking empty mid-burst, and scrambled for a reload from his pack. Madness. This is madness. but Red's voice carried faint over the din. "Keep it hot, Tommy. 1 more minute." The minutes stretched eternal. Red's next play was desperation's poetry. He dragged a wrecked ammo crate from the outpost's fringe, bandoliers of 30 cal rounds, frost-brittle but volatile, and lashed it to a sapling with bootlaces, rigging a crude incendiary. Matches from Diaz's kit struck hasty on his thigh, and the bundle smoked sullen, then caught with a whoosh that lit the underbrush like a signal fire. Not big, smoke mostly, coiling thick and oily, but timed perfect as the Panzers nosed closer, spotters mistaking it for a burning CP, a rally point under siege. Weber saw it through his scopes, flames licking the thicket, shadows darting. "There, concentrate. Infantry, assault that fire." His Panther bucked, the 75mm lobbing HE that cratered the snow 20 yards shy, the blast wave flattening saplings and hurling Red sideways into a drift. Ears boxed, vision spotting black, he tasted copper, bit lip maybe or worse. Up. Math ain't done. He pushed vertical, the world tilting, and fired blind into the assaulting squad, the Garand's recoil a grounding thump. 2 down, screams blending with the wind. Diaz's reload jammed, ice in the action, and he clubbed the Thompson's bolt with his helmet, cursing saints. A German crested his berm, bayonet low, and Diaz met him with the buttstock, a wet crack that dropped the man gurgling. "Red, they're closin'." "Light the flare, now." Red bellowed back, his own voice raw. Diaz stomped the plate, and the flare rocketed up, bursting crimson over the field, a bloody halo crowning the smoke. To the circling Mi-109s high overhead, it was a call. To Weber, it was confirmation. Yanks massing. Air support inbound. He keyed the net urgent. Pull back. Regroup at the rise. Possible Sturmwaffen. The retreat was no rout, but it cracked the momentum. Panzers slewing reverse, treads gouging ruts, half-tracks limping in tow. The infantry peeled off, dragging wounded, leaving the gully a charnel of bodies twisted like driftwood. Red collapsed in the thicket, chest heaving, the smoke stinging his eyes to tears. Diaz stumbled over minutes later, sleeve torn and blooming red, Thompson slung loose. We did it? They're pulling back." Red managed a nod, the Garand across his lap like a sleeping child. Bought the line time, maybe an hour. But the cost tallied in his head. Kowalski gone, the radio man Grayson, his squad whittled to echoes. Eli's ghost loomed close, approving, accusing. "You bent the rules, little brother." Broke 'em clean. The sun dipped toward noon, indifferent, casting long shadows over the traps sprung and spent. Silence reclaimed the field, broken only by the distant rumble, regrouping, not retreating. Red's hands shook as he reloaded, fingers fumbling the clips. 1 hour. Math says that's enough. Diaz bandaged his arm, crude, teeth-tearing strip from his shirt. "What's next, boss? We can't keep dancing forever." Red met his gaze, the copper hair matted with soot, eyes burning clear. "Next, we make 'em pay for the encore." The wind sighed through the birches, carrying the sizzle of snow on embers, proof that heat lingered in the freeze. Each trick had bought another minute, each echo another breath. But minutes were currency in the Bulge, and Red's coffers ran thin. Recklessness isn't madness, it's the math of men with nothing left to lose. The noon sun hung like a faulty bulb, casting a pallid glare over the Ardennes that turned every snowflake into a dagger's edge. The regrouped Panzers idled at the rise, their exhaust stacks belching oily veils that merged with the smoke from Red's incendiary, a greasy fog that clung to the birches like a bad omen. Lieutenant Weber paced his turret's confines, the metal deck plates slick under his boots from tracked-in slush. His map fluttered in the draft, Wolf Point marked with a hasty X, stubborn, this pocket. "No more games," he growled into the interphone, voice tinny over the crew's hum. "Full assault. Mortars on the thicket, then we roll over it. Infantry, fix bayonets, flush the rats." The order rippled out, mortars thumped from the rear, shells arcing high before plummeting into the underbrush with crumps that shook the earth like God's own hammer. Dirt and splintered wood fountained skyward, the blasts marching methodical toward Diaz's birch nest. Red felt the concussions in his chest, a drumbeat sinking to his pulse as he hunkered in the ditch, the wrecked jeeps his last gambit. "They're done playin', time to bite." His hands, raw and cracked from the cold, worked feverish over the lead vehicle's fuel line, siphoning the dregs into a jerry can, the gasoline's sharp reek cutting through the cordite haze like a knife through fog. Diaz's position took the brunt. The first shell landed 20 yards shy, uprooting a birch in a spray of frozen roots and shrapnel that whined like lost souls. Incoming! The corporal's shout was half swallowed by the roar, but Red heard it, belly flat in the snow, willing his body smaller. The next round was closer. Boom, and birch bark exploded inward, shards peppering Diaz's foxhole like grape shot. He fired blind through the gap, the Thompson's burst defiant, dropping a mortar spotter mid-sight before the world inverted. The blast caught him sidelong, a pressure wave that slammed Diaz against the berm, ribs cracking like dry twigs, shrapnel kissing his thigh in a hot kiss that bloomed crimson through his trousers. He hit the snow gasping, the subgun skittering from numb fingers, the world a ringing blur of white and fire. Red? The call was weak, more exhale than yell, lost in the settling debris. Pain lanced deep, a fire that spread with every breath, but Diaz clawed for the weapon. Fingers closing on the stock slick with his own blood. Not like this. Not leaving the loco to dance alone. He dragged himself up, sighting Fuzzy on the half-track creeping forward, and squeezed. Rounds pinging harmless off the glacis. Red saw the bloom of red on the snow, a flag in the white, and something primal twisted in his gut. Tommy, no time for grief. Grief was a luxury for rallies, not rear guards. He abandoned the siphon, slinging the Garand and humping the jerry can in a fireman's carry, the weight a mule's load on his shoulders. Mortar rounds walked closer, the ground bucking underfoot, and he sprinted zigzag through the open, legs pumping like pistons in the crust. A shell whispered past, cratering 10 yards left, the blast shoving him sideways into a drift that swallowed him to the waist. He thrashed free, snow in his mouth tasting of ash and iron, and pushed on. 50 yards, 40. The jeep's husks a beacon in the madness. Diaz fired again, the Thompson's drum empty now, clicks echoing hollow. He fumbled for clips, but his vision tunneled, edges blackening. The cross at his throat a cold anchor. Germans crested the berm, 3 shadows and Feldgrau STGs leveled, and he clubbed the air with the buttstock as the first loomed, bayonet thrusting low. The blade caught his shoulder, a shallow rake that parted wool and flesh, but Diaz twisted, driving the metal spur into the man's throat with a guttural "Vete al infierno." The German gurgled, collapsing atop him in a tangle of limbs and steam. The others fired, crack, crack, bullets tugging at the snow around him, one grazing his helmet with a tang that snapped his head back. Diaz rolled, pain a white-hot forge in his side, and came up firing the pistol he'd forgotten in his belt. A Colt .45, bark louder than its bite. One down, face ruined, the last flanked, kicking the Thompson away and leveling his rifle. The shot was point blank, but Diaz lunged, tackling low like a barrio brawler, the pair tumbling into the crater's lip. They grappled silent, breaths mingling hot and ragged, until Diaz's knife found purchase, up under the ribs, a wet twist that ended it. He slumped back, the world spinning slow, blood pooling warm under him, cooling fast in the snow. Red, get out. The thought floated, untethered, as distant engines growled closer. The Panzers were moving again, treads pulverizing the trap's remnants, the infantry bounding in their wake. Diaz's eyes fluttered, the sun a halo now, saints whispering in the haze. "Forgive me, Mama. Tell the boys I danced." His hand loosened on the cross, the light fading to gray. Red reached the jeeps as Diaz's last shot echoed, a punctuation in the storm. He dumped the can, splashing gasoline in a wide arc across the lead wreck's undercarriage, the fuel soaking the dry grass tufts that poked through the snow like desperate fingers. The odor hit him full, heady, volatile, a promise of inferno. Bait. That's what this was. The jeep as Judas goat, lured to the slaughter to drag the devils down. He wired the battery again, cross-sparking to the fuel line with stripped commo wire from the CP, timing it crude but true. 30 seconds from ignition to bloom, enough for the lead tank to nose incurious. The Garand barked twice more, crack, crack from the ditch's lip, shots high and wide to draw eyes, silhouettes against the smoke. A German machine gun team, lugging their MG-42 like a reluctant bride, swung toward the noise, the gunner's loader feeding belts frantic. Red ghosted left, using the second jeep's hulk for cover, and flanked them low, bayonet work, silent as sin. The blade slipped between plates at the kidney, the gunner folding without a sound. The loader turned, eyes wide, but Red's rifle butt met his temple with a crunch that dropped him limp. He stripped the MG, got mid-un stamped ironic on the stock, and humped it back, the barrel's weight a penance. No time to mount it proper. He wedged the bipod in the snow, belt draped loose, and cranked the bolt. Clack, the mechanism stiff with frost but yielding. The Panzers crested the gully now, two abreast. Weber's Panther in the van, its long 75mm questing like a serpent's tongue, the second a Mark IV grinding flank. Infantry shadowed close, STGs probing the jeeps. Shadows expecting ghosts. Clear the wrecks, could be charges. A Feldwebel barked, but curiosity killed. The lead dismount edged forward, poking the lead jeep's tire with his bayonet. Red squeezed the trigger. The MG-42 awoke with its signature rip, that sewing machine snarl that stitched the air at 1,200 rounds a minute. The burst hosed the infantry, bodies jerking like puppets on bad strings, pink mist blooming in the white. 5 down in the arc, the rest diving prone, screams tangling with the echo. The Panther slewed, Coke's MG chattering back, rounds chewing the jeep's fender to scrap, but Red was already shifting. Drag fire, the belt paying out in a brass river that steamed on the snow. Weber's world narrowed to the gun flash, a single nest, amplified again. Machine gun, left wreck, gunner, he on that scrap. The main gun boomed, recoil shoving the turret back with a hydraulic whine, the shell slamming the second jeep dead center. It erupted in a secondary, ammo cooking off in pops like firecrackers. But the lead held, its wiring intact, engine coughing to life under the barrage. Headlights flickered erratic, casting the Panther's hull in stark relief, and the driver instinctively nosed closer. Treads crunching deliberate, mistaking it for a runner. Now, Red killed the MG, overheat steaming the barrel, and bolted for the ditch's far lip, the jerry can's remnants sloshing in his wake. He hit the ignition wire with a tossed rock, clink, and the jeep roared full, lurching forward on its mangled axle like a drunk toward the bar. Straight at the Panther's glacis, 20 yards, 10, tires spinning futile in the slush, headlights blinding the cupola slits. Weber cursed, "Ramming, back up," but the driver was committed, treads locked in reverse too late. The jeep collided with a crunch of metal on metal, hood crumpling like tin foil, and hung there suspended, engine revving mad. 5 seconds. 4. The Germans scattered, the Feldwebel bellowing, "Zurich! Feuer!" 3. The fuel ignited. Whoosh, a liquid fire that bloomed orange and voracious, licking up the Panther's front slope, melting paint to blisters and igniting the spare tracks lashed to the hull. The driver panicked, gunning reverse, but the blaze spread fast, gasoline vapors finding the exhaust vents. 2. Weber kicked the hatch override, smoke already fouling the turret, his gunner choking on the acrid bite. 1. The world went white-hot. The jeep's tank detonated in a boom that lifted the Panther's bow a foot off the snow, shockwave rippling out to flatten the flanking infantry like wheat under a scythe. The Panther slewed back, undercarriage aflame, treads shedding rubber and black curls that sizzled on the frost. Secondary explosions popped inside, ammo maybe, or the fuel cells, turning the beast into a pyre, flames roaring 20 feet high, the odor of burning oil and synthetic rubber, a choking pall. Red hit the deck behind the ditch, the blast wave slapping him like a giant's hand, ears boxed to silence. He pushed up slow, vision spotting, the Garand half buried beside him. The Mark IV hesitated, turret whipping frantic, but Weber's ride was done. Crew bailing from the hatches, one engulfed instant, his scream a brief counterpoint to the crackle. The half-tracks peeled wide, mortars falling silent in the confusion. Alone now. Diaz's shape was still in the birches, a dark smudge against the white, unmoving as the smoke curled skyward. Red's throat tightened, the cold no match for the burn. "You danced good, Tommy." Bought the encore. No saints came for consoling, just the wind, carrying the sizzle of snow melting on hot armor, proof that hell could freeze over and still boil. The remaining Panzers were formed distant, engines revving wary, the spearhead bloodied but not broken. 8 left, probing cautious now, the infantry thin to whispers. Red chambered around, the clink loud in his skull, and scanned the ridge ahead, the last choke, a spine of rock overlooking the true road to Bastogne. One bazooka round waited there, scavenged from the CP's demo kit, its tube frost-rimed but potent. 1 shot. Make it count. He moved alone, ghosting through the drifts, Eli's shadow long at his side. Cornered, little brother, or chosen? The sun dipped lower, shadows lengthening like fingers reaching for the grave. He wasn't brave. He was cornered. and corners make legends. The Ardennes turned treacherous as the sun surrendered to bruise purple clouds, the wind rising in fits that whipped the snow into a blinding veil. Flakes no longer fell, they lashed, horizontal barbs that stung exposed skin like salt in wounds, turning the fields into a white maelstrom where visibility shrank to whispers. Red Mallory crested the ridge alone, the last spine of rock before the crossroads' true maw, his boots carving a ragged path through drifts knee-deep and treacherous. The bazooka tube hung heavy across his back, a 20-pound lance of galvanized steel and high explosive, its warhead frost-rimed and ominous. 1 round. That's all the CP's demo cache had yielded, a single 2.36-inch rocket, fins chipped but fused true, the kind that could punch a hole in a Panzer's soul if God and gravity conspired. He dropped prone behind a boulder outcrop, the stone's chill leaching through his coat like a thief in the night. The Garand lay beside him, barrel canted to the slope, 8 rounds left in the clip. Spares gone to the wind and the dead. Diaz's cross, pried from the corporal's stiffening fingers in the birches, dangled from his neck now, a makeshift talisman bumping against his dog tags with every heartbeat. For Tommy, or Eli, for the line. The ridge overlooked the road proper, a rutted scar snaking southeast to Bastogne, flanked by frozen hedgerows that clawed at the sky like skeletal fingers. Lose it, and the Bulge's jaws snapped shut. Below, the spearhead regrouped in the gathering gale, 8 Panzers hunkered like iron wolves against the storm. Weber's replacement, a squat Mark IV, its command pennant fluttering ragged, idled at the fore, treads churning slush to mud as engineers swarmed the wrecks, dousing the Panther's pyre with snow and curses. The blaze had guttered low, reduced to sullen embers that hissed defiance at the flakes, but the air reeked of it still, charred rubber and synthetic flesh, a charnel perfume carried on the gusts. Weber himself was gone, baled with burns across his hands, barking orders from a half-track now, his duelist's poise cracked like thin ice. Vorwärts, the storm covers us, push the road, no more delays. His voice crackled over the net, laced with the raw edge of a man who'd tasted Yankee spite. Infantry reformed in the lee, 30 shadows stamping life into limbs, STGs slung and bayonets fixed. Mortars stayed silent, ammo low, tubes iced, but the half-tracks MGs quested forward, 20mm flak guns elevated against the whiteout. The lead Mark IV lurched ahead, its Maybach engine a muffled roar swallowed by the howl, headlights cutting futile cones through the blizzard. Spotters in the cupola cupped eyes against the drive, binocs fogging instant. They knew the math now, remnants, not regiment. But the storm was ally and blindfold both, perfect for a final sweep. Red's breath fogged the boulder, his exhalations timed shallow to avoid plume spotting. The cold was biblical, a deep freeze that turned joints to rust and thoughts to lead, but adrenaline was the counter. Sharp electric, honing his senses to the ridge's symphony, the whump of treads compressing snow 100 yards down, the snap of canvas flaps on the half-tracks, the faint clink of gear as Germans huddled. Eli's ghost sat shotgun in his skull, unbidden. Smart money's retreat, red, lived to see Kentucky green. But Kentucky was a dream, and dreams died waiting, ain't waitin' no more. He glassed the approach with Grayson's shattered binocs, lenses cracked but serviceable, the lead tank resolving ghost-like through the scrim. The Mark IV was veteran steel, shirts and skirts hung scarred from prior kisses, the 75mm WK-40 jutting aggressive, its mantelet pocked with ricochet scars. Driver's view slits glowed faint yellow, the crew buttoned tight against the gale, weak spot the side where the transmission bellies. Funnel him. Red's mind tallied the ground. The ridge sloped gentle here, a natural funnel narrowing to a defile choked with boulders. Perfect ambush geometry if you could thread the needle blind. The wind gusted fierce, piling snow against the rock, and Red used it, shucking his coat to bare wool, the chill a shock that numbed fingers instant. He worked fast. Garand propped as a rest, the bazooka unslung and laid parallel, tube elevated crude on a rucksack padded with his shed garment. The rocket nestled snug, safety clipped, the igniter's wire trailing to his glove like a lifeline. Sight picture, turret ring, where the plate meets hull. Hit there, and she bruise. Training flashes, Fort Benning 43, instructors droning on backblast and standoff, but this was no range. This was reckoning. The column advanced, the Mark IV nosing into the defile first, treads pulverizing ice with crunch-crunch that echoed off the rocks like accusations. Infantry flanked wide, probing the drifts with ski poles, turned bayonets, their Feldgrau blending to ghosts in the white. A half-track followed 20 yards back, its flak gun swiveling lazy, the gunner hunched against the cab's frame. Red waited, pulse a metronome, 50 yards, 40. The storm peaked, visibility collapsing to 30, the tank's hull materializing sudden, a behemoth emerging from fog, its engine's growl now thunder in the narrows. Now, Red fired the Garand first, crack, the round whining off the turret's cheek, a deliberate miss to spook. The Mark IV slewed, Coke's MG barking blind into the blizzard, green tracers lancing wild and low, chewing snow to vapor. Find contact, Rets! The commander's shout crackled frantic, the cupola hatch popping as he stood half out, binocs sweeping the ridge. Return fire stitched the slope. STG bursts from the flanks, bullets thwipping off stone inches from Red's boot. But the gale warped trajectories, rounds sailing high into the void. He shifted, belly flat, the bazooka shouldered awkward in the confines, the rubber pad biting his cheek. The tank hesitated, driver gunning forward to close, treads biting the funnel's throat. 20 yards, close enough to smell the diesel. The odor hit then, hot metal and exhaust cutting the frost like a slap. Red's finger hovered the igniter, the wire taut in his grip. Eli whispered urgent. One shot, little brother. Make it holy. The cross swung cold against his chest. Diaz's benediction. The commander spotted him, or the shadow of him, binocs locking on the boulder's edge. Dort, Einzelner Schütz MG, Unterdrücken. The half-track's flak gun traversed brap-brap 20mm shells detonating airbursts that showered the ridge with shrapnel, rock chips stinging Red's neck like hornet stings. He ducked, the world a cacophony of wine boom, but held, hold the line, and squeezed. The bazooka bucked like a mule, the thwomp of launch muffled by the storm, backblast scorching the snow behind him to steam but harmless in the open. The rocket streaked low, a magnesium tail cutting the white, fins stabilizing true despite the crosswind. It struck perfect. Turret base, where weld met plate, the warhead's shaped charge punching through with a crack that echoed like lightning on stone. Penetration instant, molten copper jet, scything the fighting compartment, igniting fuel and sparking ammo in a chain of pops that built to crescendo. The Mark IV shuddered, bow dipping as the driver slewed instinctive, but it was done. The turret ring belched flame, hatches blowing outward in a gout of fire that lit the blizzard infernal, crew silhouettes cartwheeling black against the orange. Secondary bloom followed. Boom. The turret lifting half off its race, slamming back askew with a clang that sang over the wind. Fuel tanks ruptured, diesel pouring to feed the pyre, flames roaring 20 feet in defiance of the snow, melting flakes to hissing rain that steamed on the armor. The column froze, engines revving reverse in panic, the half-track's gunner hosing the ridge wild but wide, shells bursting short in the defile. Infantry dove for cover, STGs chattering suppressive but uncoordinated, the storm turning their advance to rout. Weber's voice cut the net, raw with disbelief. Panzer sechs getroffen. Rückzug. Reformieren. Hit, one man, one shot, and the spearhead's head severed. The remaining tanks peeled back, treads gouging escape, leaving the defile a charnel, the Mark IV a funeral pyre, its dead commander slumped over the shattered cupola, binocs dangling like a noose. Red ejected the spent tube, the clatter lost in the gale, and snatched the Garand, firing 3 quick, crack, 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 to herd the flankers, shadows scattering like leaves. Shrapnel had kissed him in the launch, a hot furrow across his ribs, blood seeping warm under the tunic, the pain a distant thunder building. He pushed up, vision blurring at the edges, the cold rushing in to claim the void. One down, line holds, but the math tallied grim. Diaz cold in the birches, Grayson twisted in wire, the squad's ghosts thick as the falling white. Eli's arm around his shoulders now, solid as the boulder. Enough, Red. You danced. Now run. He staggered down the reverse slope, the roads promise a faint ribbon through the hedgerows, boots numb and faltering. The storm howled triumph and dirge, kit snow sifting into the wound like grave dust. Distant, the Panzer's retreat rumbled, stuttered broken, but Bastogne breathed another hour, maybe 2. Red collapsed against a hedgerow, the Garand across his knees, breath coming in wet rasps. The cross swung heavy, Diaz's weight and Eli's echo. Reckless? Nah. Just. The wind stole the rest, leaving only the pyre's distant glow, a beacon in the white. Survival wasn't a medal or a manual, it was this. The weight of one shot, the burn of one wound, the silence after the storm's roar. They called him reckless. He called it survival. Dawn broke grudging over the Ardennes. The storm's fury spent to a whimper of flurries that dusted the wreckage like powdered ash from a cold hearth. The sky lightened to a bruised lavender, the first rays slanting through the pines to gild the frozen tableau. The defile a smoking scar, the Mark IV's husk a blackened skeleton splayed across the road like a felled giant, its turret askew and hatches yawning empty to the wind. Flames had guttered hours ago, leaving only the acrid ghost of diesel and charred steel, mingling with the crisp bite of melting snow. The spearhead was broken. 7 Panzers limped back to the Rhine pockets, their crews muttering of Geisterjäger, ghost hunters in the white. Weber, bandaged and bitter in a field hospital, would pencil it as unexpected resistance in his after-action, the word Tolkien, reckless, scratched out and rewritten as fanatish. The 101st Airborne's Pathfinders crested the ridge first, a ragged scout team from Easy Company, their M1s slung easy but eyes sharp as they picked through the drifts. Sergeant Lipton led, a lanky Ohio farm boy turned paratrooper, his breath fogging the air as he glassed the defile with scavenged binocs. Contact. No, Rex. Jerry Armour, looks like. The words hung low, the squad fanning out instinctive, flankers low to the hedgerows, pointman probing the pyre with a bayonet's nudge. The air hummed with that post-battle hush, the kind where the wind whispers names of the unburied. Lipton froze at the boulder outcrop, the snow mounded queer around a shape half-buried, one arm outstretched like an accusation to the sky. He knelt, brushing flakes from the helmet's brim. Mallory, JPVT 1/6 NF stenciled faint in the frost. Red's face was turned to the dawn, freckles stark against skin gone waxy pale, lips parted on a final breath that tasted of copper and resolve. The Garand lay clutched in rigid fingers, barrel canted as if still sighting. The bazooka tube discarded nearby, its rockets brass empty and glinting. Diaz's cross dangled from Red's neck, tangled in the dog tags, a silver glint catching the light like a deferred prayer. Jesus, kid's gone. Lipton's voice cracked, the squad closing in silent, boots crunching the crust to a halt. Private Webster, the Harvard boy with the sketch pad, dropped to a knee beside Red, gloved hand hovering before touching the shoulder, stiff, the cold's quick work. Single, against that? He gestured to the defile, the Mark IV's gutted hull, treads sheared and smoking. The gully back, 100 yards littered with half-tracks slewed in drifts, their 20mm twisted like broken limbs. The outposts fringe a charnel of traps sprung and spent, grenade craters pocking the snow like smallpox scars, birch thickets splintered to matchsticks. The jeep pyre reduced to a sooty frame exhaling lazy wisps. The scouts pieced it slow, following the trail like breadcrumbs in a grim tale. Boot prints weaving erratic through the white, leading from the CP's crater, Grayson's body still twisted in the wire, map case clutched like a talisman, to the ditch's MG nest, belt casings frozen in brass fans, to the birches where Diaz lay, Thompson across his chest, thigh wound crusted black. The cross's chains snapped, but the man arranged deliberate, as if Red had time for one last right. 2 men, Lipton tallied low, voice thick, held the point, bought us the road. The squad stood vigil a beat, helmets doffed to the wind, the silence heavy with the math. 6 tanks disabled in the haze, 3 from the initial traps, the Panther to the Jeep's kiss, the Mark IV to the Ridge's thunder. Dozens of German dead or vanished into the woods, their SDGs abandoned like shed skins. Word raced up the chain like fire on dry grass. By mid-morning, a Jeep convoy rumbled in, engineers with satchel charges to deny the wrecks, medics with morphine syrettes for the ghosts, a major from Division Intel with a notepad and a frown. The after-action started hasty, pieced from the survivors' ragged accounts. The routed platoon rallying in the woods, 5 souls who'd fled the dawn ambush, only to circle back on the echoes of Red's chaos. Private Ellis, the Brooklyn kid with the harmonica, stammered at first over coffee grounds boiled black. It was Mallory, sir. Red. LT went down calling retreat, but he stayed. Lights in the jeeps, bangs from everywhere. Thought we had a company holding. The major nodded, scribbling furious, the notebook filling with contradictions. One man's Garand mimicking a bar squad. Demo charges daisy-chained on fishing line. A flare turned false prophet. And the tanks? Ellis swallowed. Eyes on the ridge. He made 'em dance, sir. Chaos. Diaz covered him till the mortars. The words trailed, the squad's remnants nodding grim. Kowalski's Hershey bars divvied in the rally, a toast to the loco pair. By noon, the report crystallized. 14 violations tallied. Unauthorized scavenging, improvised demolitions, failure to retreat, insubordination implied in every boot print. Grayson's orders, radio logs from the CP's husk, all painted red as liability incarnate. But the coda turned it. One impossible victory. The road to Bastogne held. The line stiffened. The Bulge's bulge blunted at Wolf Point. The major closed the notebook. Gaze on the ridge. Rewrite it. Heroics first, footnotes later. They buried them shallow that afternoon, the ground too frozen for deep graves, picks ringing dull on the permafrost. Red atop the ridge, Diaz beside in the birches, cross returned to the corporal's palm, folded shut. No chaplain? Lipton read from a dog-eared psalm, voice steady against the wind. Yea, though I walk through the valley. The squad fired 3 volleys, the crack, crack, crack echoing clean into the pines, casings pattering hot into the snow. A splintered signpost marked the spot. Wolf Point scored out, reckless ridge carved hasty with a bayonet's edge. Years thawed the Ardennes slow, the forests reclaiming the scars with stubborn green. 1945 saw VE Day, the Bulge a footnote in the triumph. 1950, the ridge a whisper in veteran halls. Red's name etched faint on a 106th memorial plaque in Arlington, beside Eli's. Brothers reunited, one straight, one crooked. Diaz's folks got the cross back, wrapped in a letter from Lipton. Your boy danced with saints. The report yellowed in archives, 14 violations redacted to extraordinary initiative, the chaos canonized. Kentucky hollered on without red. The Mallory farm sold to the coal barons in 47, the tobacco rows gone to slag heaps. But the stories lingered, farm wives trading them over quilting bees. The red-haired boy who bent the bulge like a willow switch. In 68, a Vietnam LT, Webster's nephew, the sketchpad heir, hiked the ridge on leave, tracing the boot prints, long overgrown. He found a brass casing, pocketed it like a relic, and penned a letter to the VFW. Reckless. He just ran out of rules first. The silence that followed was the deepest cut, not the storm's howl, nor the pyre's crackle, but the quiet after volleys, when the wind sifts through pines and whispers, what if? What if Grayson had lived, the book unbent? What if Red had waited, Eli's path his own? The ridge held no answers, only echoes. The sizzle of snow on armor, proof that heat defies the freeze. The snap of rifle fire blending with a heartbeat, timing defiance. The weight of a bazooka on frozen hands, faith forged to fire. The moment between recoil and hush, when one man's math rewrites the map. In the veterans' reunions, 75 in Bastogne, old men with canes and stories gathered under the monument, a bronze infantryman mid-stride, Garand-shouldered, eyes on the horizon. Lipton, gray now, raised a glass. To the kid who made chaos fight for him. Murmurs rippled. Red, yeah, the reckless one. And the toast landed heavy. The silence after tasting of bourbon and regret. Reckless men don't plan to be heroes. They just run out of rules before they run out of fight.